The sun was sinking low over Mayfield Plantation, its last light spilling across the golden fields like spilled honey over cracked glass. The air was thick, full of gnats and the faint sweetness of cut cane. A crow cried somewhere far off, and that sound seemed to split the evening in two, before and after Jonah came to work there. No one in the county knew where Jonah had come from. He spoke little, carried a small leather satchel, and moved like a man used to silence. His back was straight, his eyes dark as wet soil. The overseer had hired him in early spring to mend fences and tend to the sugar-cane rows, and from the first day, the Mayfield sisters noticed him. Clara was the first to speak his name. "He's not like the others," she whispered to her twin, Eliza, as they watched him from their window. "Look how still he stands, like the land itself listens to him." Eliza laughed lightly, she always did. "You watch too long, Clara. Father would switch you if he saw you staring after field hands." But that evening, when the dinner bells rang and Jonah walked past the porch to fetch water, both sisters found their eyes drawn again. It wasn't defiance in his step, it was something quieter. Confidence born of endurance. That night, in their shared room, the twins lay in their separate beds staring at the ceiling. The sound of frogs drifted through the shutters. "Clara," Eliza said softly, "what would you do if Father asked you to marry someone you didn't love?" "I'd do what I must," Clara answered after a pause. "That's what's expected." Eliza turned her face toward the wall, whispering, "Then maybe I'm not meant for what's expected." The plantation slept under the heavy southern moon, but the Mayfield house never truly slept. It held secrets in its walls, secrets of the old world, when everything was owned, even hearts. As the months passed, the sisters grew restless. Their father's temper, once sharp and commanding, had turned brittle with drink. His wealth was fading with the soil. He spoke often of marrying them off, one to a banker from Montgomery, the other to a merchant's son in Savannah. Jonah worked silently through it all. He spoke only when spoken to, fixed the wagons, mended the roofs, and left each day with hands scarred but spirit untouched. Yet the twins began to compete in small ways for his glance, a pitcher of water left at the edge of the fields, a handkerchief dropped deliberately from the porch. One evening, as the sun drowned in a blood-red horizon, Clara found herself near the stables. Jonah was there, tying up the reins. "You work too hard," she said softly. He looked up, his expression unreadable. "Work's all I know, ma'am." There was a silence between them, not awkward, but charged, like thunder waiting behind clouds. Clara felt her throat tighten. "Good night then," she said quickly, retreating. But Eliza had seen. She had followed quietly, her heart beating fast. That night, when she returned to their room, she said nothing, but her eyes no longer matched her sister's. Days turned into weeks. The harvest neared. And what had started as quiet admiration grew into quiet war. The sisters spoke less at meals. Their laughter, once a duet, became two separate songs. Jonah noticed, though he wished he hadn't. He tried to stay out of sight, but fate, as it often does, had already chosen its stage. One Sunday, after church, rain began to fall, heavy, silver sheets that sent everyone running for cover. Jonah was repairing a broken shutter when Eliza appeared, her dress soaked, her hair sticking to her cheeks. "You shouldn't be out in the rain," he said, reaching for the shutter. "And you shouldn't be the only one who gets wet," she replied with a grin that trembled at the edges. He froze, unsure what to do. For a long moment, they stood beneath the eaves, rain pounding around them, thunder rolling like distant drums. Eliza looked up at him. "Do you ever get tired of this place?" "Every man gets tired," Jonah said quietly. "But not every man gets to leave." Her laughter faded. "Maybe some of us can't leave either, even when we want to." And then, Before she could speak another word, Clara appeared at the doorway, her face pale as the lightning outside. The three stood there in silence, the air between them colder than the rain. Before we dive deeper, support the channel by subscribing. That storm changed everything. What had been whispers in hallways became quiet confrontations. Eliza began taking long walks to the stables. Clara prayed more often, her voice trembling through the walls. And Jonah, caught between kindness and consequence, felt the weight of two hearts he never asked to hold. Rumors spread through the servants and workers. The Mayfield twins were no longer seen together at Sunday service. Their father, sensing unrest, started asking questions. One night, his voice boomed through the house, a roar of anger, disbelief, and pride. "What in God's name have you two done?" Neither sister answered. The old man's fury echoed until morning. By dawn, one of the horses was gone, and so was Eliza. They found her a day later, miles down the old road, beside the river that marked the plantation's edge. Jonah had found her first. He carried her back himself, silent, soaked in grief. She was alive, but her spirit was not. Clara, upon seeing her sister's pale face, wept until her voice broke. Whatever love, jealousy, or guilt had once existed between them dissolved into one unspoken truth: some things can't be shared, not even between twins. The Mayfield plantation never recovered. The crops failed, the father's health declined, and Jonah left before winter came. Some say the twins never spoke again. Others whisper that, on quiet nights, you can still see two shadows standing near the stables, identical, watching a figure walk away down the old road. And though years have buried the house beneath vines and silence, the story still drifts on the southern wind, a tale of two hearts bound by blood, and one man who carried their sorrow like a scar that never healed. The year after Jonah left, Mayfield Plantation began to rot from the inside out. The sugarcane that once shimmered green under the Alabama sun turned yellow, then brittle. The soil grew thin and gray, as if it too had tired of feeding the house that stood above it. Inside those walls, Clara and Eliza rarely spoke. They lived like reflections in two mirrors facing away from each other, same face, same eyes, but no warmth between them. Their father, Colonel Mayfield, died that winter. Some said it was grief that took him, others whispered that he drank himself into the grave trying to forget what had become of his daughters. When the funeral ended, and the last of the mourners left, the twins stood alone beside the family plot. The sky was low and heavy with clouds. "What happens to us now?" Eliza asked. Clara didn't answer. Her gloved hands were trembling. She stared down at the headstone, her lips barely moving. "We keep the land," she said finally. "It's all we have left." But the land, like everything else, was already slipping away. The workers began leaving one by one. Without the colonel's money or authority, debts piled up. Letters came from banks in Montgomery and Mobile. They went unanswered. And through it all, neither sister spoke of Jonah. But they thought of him, constantly, like a ghost neither could name aloud. At night, Eliza would sometimes wander the stables, touching the tools he once used. Clara would sit at the piano, playing the same soft hymn he had once heard from outside the window. Months passed. The seasons turned. The house began to creak with emptiness. One night, a storm rolled through, wild and unkind. Wind howled through the shutters, rain slashed at the glass, and thunder shook the old wooden bones of the house. Clara awoke to find Eliza standing at the window, her nightgown clinging to her thin frame, eyes wide. "Eliza," she whispered. Eliza didn't turn. "He's out there," she said quietly. "Jonah." Clara rose from bed, her heart pounding. "You're dreaming." Eliza pointed through the glass. By the fence. I saw him. He was looking this way. There was nothing outside but rain and the old oak tree bending under the wind. But for a brief flash, just one heartbeat of lightning, Clara did see a shape. Tall. Still. Watching. By morning, it was gone. But from that night on, neither twin could shake the feeling that the past had returned to collect what it was owed. The townsfolk began to whisper. They said the Mayfield sisters had lost their minds, that they quarreled at night, voices raised, accusing shadows of betrayal. Some said they heard laughter in the fields long after dark, others swore they saw a man's figure walking near the riverbank, though no one dared go near. The postman stopped delivering letters. The preacher stopped visiting. Then, one evening, Clara went down to the river herself. The water was low, the current slow. The air smelled of damp moss and decay. She stood on the bank, staring at the reflection of her own face trembling in the surface, and for a moment, she saw two faces there, side by side. Eliza, she whispered, though her sister was not with her. She dropped to her knees, trembling. You took him from me, she said to the reflection. And God help me, I can't forgive you. A voice answered behind her, soft, broken. No, Clara, it was you who took him from me. Clara turned. Eliza stood a few feet away, her hair wild from the wind, her eyes red and swollen. She'd been crying, or maybe she'd never stopped. What do you mean? Clara asked, her voice shaking. Eliza took a step closer. He spoke to you. You wanted him too. Don't lie to me. You followed me, Clara hissed. You were jealous. Lightning tore across the sky. The two sisters faced each other, soaked, trembling, years of love and anger tangled between them. I loved him, Eliza said, her voice breaking. Not like a dream, like something I couldn't breathe without. Clara's face hardened. And look what it's done to us. They stood in silence, thunder growling overhead. The river surged higher, licking at their boots. Eliza stepped closer still. Then maybe one of us shouldn't be here anymore. For a heartbeat, time stopped. Then came the scream, sharp, short, swallowed by the storm. When dawn came, only one sister returned to the house. She said nothing for days. The workers who remained packed their belongings and left. By the end of the month, the plantation was empty. Except for her. Years passed. The house grew old, its white paint turning the color of bone. The wind carried dust through the broken shutters. Weeds climbed the porch. Travelers said they sometimes saw a woman in the upper window, pale, unmoving, staring down at the fields that no longer grew. Some said she talked to herself, whispering to someone who wasn't there. One man claimed he rode past at sunset and saw two women standing on the balcony, side by side. When he looked again, only one remained. The town forgot the Mayfields eventually. The plantation sank into legend. But sometimes, when storms roll across the hills and the river rises, folks swear they hear voices near the fence line, two women arguing, a man's name carried on the wind. And if you stand long enough near the stables, you might hear the sound of a hammer striking wood, slow and steady, like someone still working, still mending what was broken long ago. Because some stories don't end. They echo. And at Mayfield Plantation, where love turned to rivalry and devotion became a curse, the echoes never truly fade. The Mayfield house stood alone, breathing dust. Windows that once shimmered with candlelight now stared empty toward the horizon. The grand staircase, once polished by the soft steps of youth, groaned beneath the weight of time. Curtains hung like tired ghosts, still swaying in the memory of a wind long gone. Clara, or perhaps it was Eliza, for none could ever be sure which survived, lived in that house like a shadow that refused to pass on. Her days slipped by in silence, marked only by the sound of a rocking chair creaking on the porch and the distant hum of the river. Sometimes she would walk the empty halls, trailing her fingers along the wallpaper. She'd stop at the old piano, touch the keys but never play. The dust gathered thick, but beneath her touch, a few white spots still shone, as if even decay respected her sorrow. She didn't speak to anyone, because there was no one left to speak to. But she spoke within. And always to the same presence. "Do you forgive me?" she would whisper into the stillness. And though no one answered, she often felt the air move slightly beside her, like someone sighing just out of sight. As the seasons passed, the house began to bend. The roof dipped. The walls split. The garden became a jungle of thorns. But she remained, unwilling, or unable, to leave. Each dawn found her at the window, watching the mist crawl over the fields. Once, she dreamt of escape, of trains, cities, freedom, but those dreams had dried up like the river in summer. All that was left now was the rhythm of survival. Sometimes, late at night, she would hear footsteps upstairs. Slow. Familiar. They never frightened her. She would only say softly, "Eliza, if that's you, I'm here." Then she'd listen, for the answer that never came. But the air always grew cold when she spoke that name. One autumn morning, she found herself in the garden, standing by the old fence. The wood was splintered and gray. The fields beyond it were empty, but the soil still held the faint scent of sugarcane, as if remembering what it used to be. A wind passed through, carrying whispers that were almost words. She closed her eyes. "You still haunt me, don't you?" The wind fell silent. She turned back toward the house, her dress brushing through dead leaves. And as she climbed the porch steps, she saw, for a heartbeat, her own reflection in the window. But not quite. The face looking back was softer. Smiling faintly. Sad, but not cruel. She froze. "Eliza?" The reflection blinked, once, and vanished as if the glass itself had exhaled. Her knees buckled. She sank to the floor, breath trembling, tears cutting lines through the dust on her cheeks. All at once, it was too much. The years of silence, the weight of guilt, the echo of her sister's voice every time the wind turned through the halls. She whispered, "I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted peace." The old piano in the parlor gave a single note, soft, distant, struck by no hand. The sound lingered through the house like a thread of smoke. And she understood. Forgiveness, perhaps, had never been beyond reach, it had simply been waiting for her to ask aloud. The years bled into one another after that. The seasons no longer mattered. Time, in that house, had folded in on itself. The woman who remained, whichever twin she had been, became something less of flesh and more of memory. Neighbors miles away spoke of seeing light in the windows some nights, faint and flickering. Others swore they heard a piano playing, soft as a lullaby, when no soul lived there anymore. But inside those crumbling walls, peace finally found its way. For when the wind passed through the parlor now, it carried two voices, gentle, indistinguishable, humming together like they had once done as girls. And if anyone had stood close enough to the porch that final evening, they might have seen her, sitting in her rocking chair, eyes closed, a faint smile on her lips, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The chair rocked once, twice, and then stopped. The Mayfield house was silent at last. No more footsteps. No more whispers. Just the sound of the wind moving through the reeds, carrying the last breath of the Mayfield twins into the night. Even now, when the river swells and the sky turns gold with the last light of day, the locals say you can still see two figures by the fence, standing close, side by side, watching over the land they never truly left. Not as rivals. Not as ghosts of bitterness. But as sisters, bound forever by love that time could not destroy. And so ends the story of the Mayfield twins, two hearts that broke, healed, and found each other again in the silence where memory lives. Time forgot the Mayfield house, but the land never did. The seasons came and went, brushing over the fields like waves over buried bones. The sugarcane never grew again. The soil had memory, and memory can be heavier than stone. The roof caved first. The wind crept in through the rafters, carrying dust from faraway fields. The vines swallowed the porch. Rainwater dripped through the cracks, carving lines through the wallpaper like tears. No one lived there now. But nothing in the South ever truly dies, it just changes form. When the moon rose over the valley, the light caught on the cracked window panes, and for a heartbeat, the house looked alive again. If you stared long enough, you could swear you saw movement inside, the faint rustle of a dress, the turning of a page, the slow glide of a rocking chair. Sometimes, the wind carried faint laughter, two voices, similar, soft, as if whispering secrets to each other. The laughter never lasted long. It faded, leaving only silence and the sound of the crickets. The river nearby had changed course over the years, creeping closer to the house. The current gnawed at the edge of the fields, taking pieces of fence and wood away with each passing flood. Some said it was nature. Others said the river wanted to claim what the house refused to release. One stormy night, lightning struck the old oak by the stables, the same one that had shaded Jonah as he worked all those years ago. The tree split down the middle, burning from the inside out. The sound rolled through the valley like a cannon. By morning, smoke curled from the roof of the house. Flames licked the dry wood, slow at first, then wild. The vines caught next, turning the porch into a crown of fire. But inside, nothing moved. If anyone had been there to see it, they might have sworn the flames hesitated at the parlor, as if unwilling to destroy what lingered there. The piano stood untouched while the rest of the room burned, the keys gleaming faintly in the orange light. And then, faintly, impossibly, a single note played. The fire consumed everything after that. The roof collapsed. The walls folded in. And when it was over, the Mayfield house was gone. Only ash. Only the scent of rain and smoke. But even as the ashes cooled, the land stayed strangely still. Birds did not sing. The wind would not cross the fence line. It was as though the world itself held its breath, waiting. By the next season, grass had begun to grow where the house once stood. Wildflowers pushed through the cracks. The air grew sweeter. For the first time in decades, the land looked alive. And though no one remained to see it, something had changed in the stillness. The sadness that had haunted those fields was gone, not erased, but settled, like a wound finally closed. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the mist lay heavy across the valley, two figures could sometimes be seen walking side by side through the fields. They never spoke. They never looked back. Just two outlines in the morning fog, drifting toward the river, hand in hand, until they disappeared with the light. The Mayfield story ended there, not with vengeance, not with fear, but with peace earned through years of sorrow. And long after their names were forgotten, their story remained in the air, a whisper carried by wind and memory. A story not of death, but of what lingers when love refuses to die. The house, the fields, the ghosts, all part of one endless hush. And when night falls across the valley, when the moon climbs high and paints the ruins silver, you can almost hear them again, the twins, humming that same old hymn they once sang as children. Their voices fade with the wind. And then, as always, silence.